Hello guys, my name is Petko and this is Ratio Talks. Today I'm joined by Pol Zenon. Paul is a magician, writer, and a professional mischief maker. He spent a career exposing how our senses get hijacked and why smart people fall for clever cons. We'll talk deception, psychology, and the joyful art of being fooled on purpose. Enjoy. All right, Paul, well, welcome back.
Thank you. It's been a while.
It's been a while, so it's been like, what, 10, 12 years?
It's got to be at least 10, maybe 11,
I don't remember whether we did a podcast back then, but
I don't think the concept existed.
Right, yes. Well, we did, I think we did have something like that, but it wasn't that good.
It wasn't certainly not as popular as they are now.
Definitely. But I do remember that we had an awesome event.
It was fun.
Back at a time. I would assume, still, following this line, that we found you like 20 years back, you being a skeptic, focusing mostly on psychics
and mediums, in particular. Yes, it's still an ongoing thing, but fortunately, and I don't think we can necessarily take much credit for it, but there seem to be fewer of them, and they're certainly making a lot less money than they were. I mean, back in, I think it was when I had my almost court case appearance with a certain psychic Sally Morgan, who was the big name in mediums in the UK at the time. She's now playing tiny venues, not very often. At that period, I think she was rumoured to be clearing about £500,000 a month.
Oh my God!
On live gigs. And there doesn't seem to be certainly on UK TV. There's virtually nothing of that ilk now. It's all ghost shows now.
Ghost shows, these are particularly popular.
Contacting the dead, but not specifically the dead relative children of people that are paying you money. So which is slightly healthier, I think. I mean, it's still not a particularly healthy belief. However, at least these charlatans aren't making a fortune from it.
Right. I'm actually surprised to hear that. I don't know what is exactly the trend here in Bulgaria, but in general, I thought it's like an uphill battle. It's like a Sisyphean effort to fight, phenomenons like that. And and I'm happy to hear that you actually have a sort of a successful example. I don't know why that happened. But
I think, to be honest, more than anything, it's just a kind of a TV trend. It goes through cycles. I mean, at one point, all we had on TV was cookery shows.
Right.
And then there was a space of gardening shows. And I think that was just the kind of sort of fringe. The smaller channels were doing all the kind of psychic stuff because it's cheap to produce,
Right.
But I think that's faded out. And as I say, now it's the ghost thing. To a lesser extent, the kind of UFOs, flying saucers concept. But like I say, it's cheap TV and people want to believe.
Right.
That's the issue. That's what we're always battling against, is by exposing it, you're the bad guy because you've kind of shattered their dreams, their kind of fantasy world.
Right. Let's just take a step back because when I Google you, I still find the term magician. Now, I don't know whether you describe yourself as a magician or someone else does. I feel slightly uncomfortable with that term because people still use magician more often than illusionist. Do you have that in English?
We do, I think within the magic world, amongst magicians, if you want to call them that,
right.
The term illusionist generally refers to people that are doing bigger stage illusions. So, so it's, cutting someone in half or levitating someone, or so it's tricks involving the human body, really, so putting someone in a box and shoving swords through it.
So David Copperfield is an illusionist.
An illusionist, very much so, and then you've got the people that do the kind of mind magic stuff, which is just a bizarre term, which is a mentalist, which just has become appropriated as a sort of almost an insult for someone who's kind of mentally ill.
Right.
And then you've got magicians. So magicians is sort of catch-all. I've tended to use the term trickster because it suggests a little bit more. It's got the comedy side, it's got the mischief and the deceit, basically. So I've always kind of based my stuff on playing almost a sort of a benevolent con man, if you will. Right. So someone will cheat you, but only out of a free drink rather than your house. I tend to use trickster, but magician's kind of fine. The problem, as you alluded to, is that it also refers to the dark arts, occult magic.
Breaking the laws of physics.
Yes,
and stuff,
crossing over with the psychic. psychic thing and all the rest of it. But I don't think there's a suitable alternative really for most magicians.
Right. Now, I don't know if it came from you, but this thought is kind of stuck in my mind. I spoke with a magician who said that within the internal...
Sav.
Maybe.
That was his name, yeah?
I think so, yeah.
I think I know him, yes.
So he basically said that within the internal circle of magicians, I think there was an organization even called like that,
There's the Magic Circle.
The Magic Circle,
in the UK, yeah.
That you will not be admitted in the Magic Circle, or you will be excluded from the Magic Circle if you state that you're actually doing magic. So do you have to be like very explicit about you tricking people?
No, I don't know where that's come from, because I don't think that is an actual rule.
Really?
It's a thing that gets debated a lot amongst magicians about whether you should use your powers for good or the dark side. And there are there's actually an organisation called, I think they call it psychic entertainers, who are not, and they know they're not, they are magicians, but they use, they use their powers for evil. They pretend that they're doing actual psychic stuff, but they use the term entertainers as a kind of a way of getting around that. I think it's a rule on TV that you're not allowed to say things like "you are contacting the dead," or you'll see on most TV programs, even the ghost ones, at the end it'll have a disclaimer saying "for entertainment purposes."
Right.
Psychic Sally Morgan used to say it's a holistic experiment, and you go, what does that even mean? It's like
just nice sounding words.
Yeah, but it's a disclaimer, because I think we had a thing called trading standards in the UK where you weren't allowed. It's a bit like the medical board where you can't say that a drug does certain things unless it's been proven to.
Right.
But they just do that as a small disclaimer and do it anyway.
Well, it's nice to see that there is some sort of a regulation around that, because here back in nothing of the sort is happening. It's like on TV, you have like everything, like obnoxious things. One more step back, because I'm curious. I have a son now who is has become very curious about tricks and magic, and has this very basic book like Magic for Idiots, for dummies. I'm sorry, not for idiots.
Yes. Well, amounts to the same.
Yeah, right. So he's going through them, and I told him that we actually going to have an event with a bunch of you guys, and I got curious. How did it happen with you? I mean, what was the first trick that like kind of blew your mind? Because I did that to my 5-year-old son.
Oh, the thumb,
and he went nuts.
Yes, No, I think I don't know. Back in sepia, it was. I remember seeing a TV show which I think was a Magic Circle Christmas special.
Right.
I just remember seeing magic on there. But at the same time, I was interested in comedians. So I was always interested in kind of entertainment variety in general. Yeah. So I've always kind of combined the two. So I don't know. I think back in those days, as a stereotypical gender thing, as a boy for Christmas, you either got alternate years a magic set, a box of magic tricks, or a chemistry set.
Right. You went to the dark side, my friend.
Yes, and weirdly, I ended up doing kind of sciences at school. So it's the two are kind of related, I think, in terms of, it's about logical thinking, but presented as, in disguise, really. It's always an interesting discussion, that idea that kind of magicians tend to be the ones debunking things because they're the ones good at spotting bullshit, basically.
Right.
So I kind of got into it from a psychological point of view. I was always interested in movies about con men, about heists.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about the making the money so much, or the action part of it. It was about the cleverness of the actual routine, the method of getting the money.
Yeah, so let's call it manipulation. It's like the art of manipulating people in situations.
Totally, and misdirection is a big part of it. So I was always interested in sort of general applied psychology, crime, and show business. So you put all that together, and you've basically got magic tricks, really.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that magicians are particularly well equipped to notice bullshit, and that's actually why we made this event. We as an organization, we're trying to sort of equip people with like the basic tools so they can spot bullshit.
Sure.
I remember James Randi. He blew my mind. You know, when he was doing stuff. Was it with Uri Geller and stuff?
Yes, and Peter Popoff,
Peter Popoff,
televangelist. Yeah, I was actually there in the studio when I think it must have been late 80s, maybe 86, 87, when he did the first expose of Peter Popoff.
Oh, you were in the studio?
Yeah, and
it's a historical moment.
It was in the UK, but he had recordings, audio recordings that he'd made because he'd basically got a frequency scanner and listened to the guy's earpiece with his wife feeding him awful information. I mean, really kind of disable people in the audience, and the way she was describing them, and there's a racist element to it, and all the rest of it. A real nasty piece of work. And yet, years later, he's back on the scene and
still around,
selling miracle water and then selling cancer cures, and it's just incredible. But
so what happened? How did you decide? Because you've been practicing that. You've been doing cold readings as well. You can tell us about that as well. But
sure.
How did you decide? It's like, okay, I'm going to fight these assholes. Yeah.
It was a kind of slow burn thing, really, because back when I was a teenager, I kind of grew up in a place called Blackpool, which is kind of like, if you've never been to the UK, it's kind of like Sunny Beach without the sun, really. It's kind of, it was massive back in the 50s, 60s, 70s. The local population's probably only about 40,000 people, but you get 1 million Brits there in the summer on a busy weekend, and it was just everyone was on the hustle. So it's everything from kind of food and drink, but also tarot and palm readers, pickpockets, you name it. It was kind of all rife there. So I kind of grew up working in a magic shop there through my teenage years, and got to know a few local characters. One of whom was called Joe Riding, and Joe Riding had a very kind of northern English accent and used to call it the tarot pack, and he was one of the first doing it commercially, working in bars and things like that. And so he taught me. He wrote a series of small books about how to do psychic stuff, basically. And so I did that for a while. Being a teenager back in the 70s, it was kind of, I sort of had an open mind about it, about whether it was real, but I was also learning trickery magic at the same time. So when I set off doing my backpacking thing to Greece when I was 19, I think it was, where I couldn't do street shows, I was doing magic and fire eating, but the police didn't take kindly to that. So I'd set up in a bar and do palm and tarot reading. And there were a couple of occasions I sort of realised how easy it was to emotionally manipulate people, and so doing this, there were a couple of occasions. There's one, some guy came up on he arrived drunk on a motorbike every night to this particular bar, and I did a reading for him one night, and so I just did this whole thing about, you need to be careful, I can see an accident in the future, maybe on this side of your body, and sure enough, the next night he came off his bike and broke his leg.
Oh, wow.
And so I had a queue round the block, for my services, and although that was good financially, it was kind of a bit uncomfortable.
Right.
And then I had a couple of girls came up, I think they're Italian, and one girl was visibly kind of distraught, sort of half crying and shaking. So I did this tarot reading, and the first card she turned over was the death card.
Oh my God.
And I know technically it doesn't mean death, it means a major change and all this kind of stuff, but try getting out of that when she'd basically come to see me because her father had just been taken into hospital with a heart attack.
Oh God.
And so that again was very uncomfortable. So cut to many, many years later, and I just kept an eye on all this stuff, and particularly people like Uri Geller, who, he's doing it for entertainment purposes in the main, but, actually self-promotion in the main. It's kind of a narcissistic thing. However, when he starts claiming to be able to heal people, that's when it gets, uncomfy for me. And so I've always kept an eye on that. But then I got a call from a tabloid newspaper in the UK about this particular character, this psychic Sally Morgan. And so they asked me to write an article about how these people might be doing what they're doing. which I did, and it all ended up as a kind of very complicated libel case and all the rest of it. Thankfully, I got away with it. The newspaper didn't.
They got sued.
Basically they did an out-of-court settlement, which they didn't really need to do, but anyway. But yeah, I mean, the good news is that a while after that, and it's never been reported particularly, but she had to do a major payout to someone that she libelled, who was a skeptic. So all that's good. So I basically got back into studying them kind of in depth at that point. So that's going back, 15 years ago, something like that. And discovered, how nasty and manipulative a lot of them are, because it's always been a background thing, and you think, well, I don't believe it, but the standard line is, if it brings a little bit of comfort, what harm can it do? And then you look at what harm it can do, and you look at the money they're making out of that, and how cynical they are exploiting grieving, vulnerable people. And so that's when I kind of got back into the debunking thing.
So just to put you on the spot here, while you were doing the tarot readings, what was your thought process? I mean, meaning that I would assume you were well-intentioned as well. Did you actually believe in what you were doing, or were you fully...
Well, initially, my main intention was to survive making a bit of money.
Of course, yes.
So that was the first thing. But I did actually believe in it when I first started doing it. The more I did it for real people, real-life situations, the more I realised how easy it is to give them the answer they want, rather than what the cards or the palm are actually telling them. So it kind of developed into a thing where you go, actually, that's probably what most of them are doing.
Right.
Or, kind of, a lot of them do, genuinely believe in it, but there's kind of fooling themselves as well. There's that sort of, I think they call them shut eyes is the term, where they actually, and it was interesting going to a spiritualist church a few years back. And I went with a friend of mine who's quite a good, he's a funny guy, but he's also an actor, and he knows about, I've talked to him about cold reading, all the rest of it. So we went independently to this spiritualist church, and it wasn't a regular meeting. They were doing this kind of circle meeting where the medium, or the whatever they call themselves, probably reverend, they find out whether you're psychic, or you find out whether you're psychic, because they go around people, and it's the funniest and bizarre thing, because they go up to someone and go, right, I can see there's a spirit near you. Are they male or female? And they go, female. And they go, you're right. You are right. And what colour hair have you? It goes down this route, and so everybody ends up believing that they're psychic.
Right.
And then you suddenly realise that there was one kind of backwards and forwards between her and an older guy, and they obviously knew a lot about each other. And you suddenly realise that they've been going to the same spiritualist church as each other for 10, 15, 20 years, so they know everything about each other.
Right.
So and I'm getting a Frank. Yeah, Frank's talking to you. Well, of course,
Yeah.
So they all know each other inside out. And so I think, again, they do believe it, hence going to a church rather than doing it in a theatre for money.
Yeah.
But they're actually fooling themselves,
Right,
in my case, it was a bit of both, really, initially. But at the end, I realised that actually I just wasn't comfortable with it from a moral point of view.
Yeah,
really.
yeah. I don't have a real problem with tarot cards reading, and all of these things, because I view them as an alternative form of therapy. You can have a very good conversation with a person and actually help them out.
Tarot is the interesting one out of them all, because basically what you're doing is using the cards as a trigger to something that's already in your head.
Yes.
So you can. People say you can't read the cards for yourself. You can, really, because if you associate the King of Pentacles with a certain emotion, and that's an emotion you'd be feeling. You're basically doing self-therapy.
Yeah. And depending on who is doing the reading, it can be either malevolent, or really, really helpful. So I don't have a real problem with tarot reading. That's that's not the thing. Okay, let's go through some basic techniques. I'm sure you're probably sick of explaining those to people and writing articles about those.
Oddly enough, I haven't kind of done it for a while, so
really?
Be interested to see whether I can remember.
I mean, the exercise here is whether you can turn me into a psychic, let's say, by giving me, some of the basics. So how do I go about in convincing someone that I know stuff about them?
Okay, well, I mean, these days, I think that's changed very much in recent years, is the whole social media angle. Because when someone gets in touch with a psychic, I mean, it's great free advertising for them, costs nothing to be there. And people, I've answered a few this week, actually, where they've gone, can you recommend someone in Blackpool that does this? And so they immediately put the name on there and they go, oh, okay, yes, I'll get in touch with them. So immediately that psychic has all the information from their Facebook page.
Right.
So they've got photographs of their family, they've got their birth dates, they've got all that background information. So it's hot reading rather than cold reading in that sense.
Right.
So if the psychic, if you were the psychic and then meets that person, all you need to do is scroll through there. I mean, the old days, mediums used to arrive in a town and go around the local graveyard and just get family names and dates.
Oh, wow.
And all that sort of stuff. And look at the
real work.
Yeah, look at the fresh graves and then basically bring that name up, because there's going to be someone in your audience that's there because that relative has died recently in a small town.
It's a lot of logistics.
So but these days so much easier. So that's the first thing. You've got the background information. You can rely on what you could loosely term intuition to a certain extent, where someone walks in a room, you're generally subconsciously judging them, maybe the background. From their accent, you might judge whether they're working class, middle class, upper class, or from jewellery, you might be able to spot a name necklace, or whether they're married, whether they're just engaged, whatever it may be from the jewellery. All that kind of stuff. So, and quite often we all do it, whether we admit it or not, but someone walks in a bar and you think whether they're gay or straight or, whichever it may be. And so you can always kind of hint that direction. And then you're studying body language to a certain extent, which I'm not a massive believer in the efficacy of body language in general. But if someone is into what you're saying, they will generally kind of like lean forward a little bit, possibly, or their hands will be open, or whatever, if they're relaxed, unless they're really confrontational.
Right.
And then, if they're not agreeing with what you're saying, I saw this in a couple of interviews I did with the press when I was trying to work a con myself, and there were a couple of press I thought they haven't bought this because they were sat there with their finger across their mouth, whatever. That's generally a good sign that I'd like to say something now that you're talking bullshit, but I'm not going to, So you've got that angle when you're fishing. It's I think where the internet term fishing came from is throwing it out there, and it's so much easier with a theatre audience because you've got a view of many people there. So when you throw out a name or a specific thing, if you'll see people nudge each other in the audience, and then you can hone in on that, and just you kind of peripheral vision. You're just kind of looking for those bodily reactions there. So you got all that sort of stuff. But the main thing I would use initially is things called Barnum statements. And Barnum statements are basically things that sound very specific to an individual, but actually they're a generalization that appeals to most people in some way. So, for example, you might say, I get the feeling that you've got very, very few close friends. You kind of like you were quite gregarious. You'd meet people and you're quite happy, but there's very few people you trust, and possibly because someone has kind of hurt you or betrayed you in the past. And you go, right, well,
that's true for everybody.
Yes, yeah. But because people are so wrapped up in themselves, they hear what they want to hear. So a bit of advice I always give people that are going to see a psychic is record it. Because when you listen back, you'll realize that maybe 70% of the stuff doesn't hit at all, but you've ignored it and you've forgotten it because of those couple of big hits that you got. I mean, there's some interesting ones, and I'm not sure particularly why, but it appeals in Ireland, this one, where they say, okay, so the gentleman that's passed away, he's got that laugh, isn't it, that always made you laugh. And he's saying, for some reason, where's my shoes? Where are my shoes? And the reason this one kicks in, I think, is because a lot of older men, when they go to hospital, you're doing that negative thing. You're not believing me now.
No, I'm just.
When they go to hospital, they don't have the shoes.
Right.
And quite often when they die in hospital, it's an issue to find which particularly their shoes. But also in Ireland, it's also quite a tradition in certain parts to bury people without their shoes. So there's these kind of little weird things, you know. Another real specific is, and you kind of need to see the visual for this, but you say, I'm getting a small scar on your leg on this side. It's probably not surgical, but it's a small scar that you've had for quite a while, somewhere near your knee. Now, that hits. I mean, I don't know what the actual...
You almost got me there because I have one on my hip.
Right,
So,
okay,
yes.
yeah. And the interesting thing about that to me is, you know, most people when they're a kid or a teenager or whatever,
Course, yeah.
and somewhere near your knee, it's your leg, it could be anywhere. Sure. But the interesting bit for me is to go on that side, right? Because if you go on that side, I could be meaning... you're right because I'm pointing to my right and you're left, or vice versa. So if you're looking in a mirror, you know what I mean? So it appeals either way. So that, you know, those are kind of little specific things. But at the end of the day, it generally boils out, if someone's come to see a psychic, they want to know about either relationships, money, or health.
Right.
It's one of those things, and usually they're looking for advice from someone who's passed away, a dead relative, basically. Yeah. I mean, there's some awful ones that I've actually heard used, which is, was he short of breath before he passed away, or did he suffer something?
In the torso,
somewhere
in the body,
somewhere in the upper body. Yes, I saw an awful. There's a guy called Joe Power who's from Liverpool in England, and I saw him at Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and I didn't realise till halfway through the show that there was another magician who was quite famous, a guy called Geoffrey Durham, who was sat on the same row as me, and halfway through the show we just looked across and saw each other and kind of went, you know. But he was absolutely dreadful because it's not an arts fringe crowd and not really his crowd. He's looking for people that don't think too much about anything. So there was a couple in there who were also from Liverpool. And so he was trying to narrow it down. And you could see that he knew this. He'd heard them talking at some point. And so he was kind of like, you know, waving around the room. Because that's another thing they do is the big gesture. They'll go, I'm getting someone over here. And he gradually narrowed it down. And he went, I'm getting something about... Italian. Is there something Italian? Have you maybe been eating pasta? Right, and it turns out there's an Italian restaurant adjoining the theatre. He'd walked past and seen them eating in the window, and you go, well, is this really the standard of the stuff? Then he got to a point where there's a guy in the audience who reacted to, I can see an older gentleman who's passed away, and you go, right, well, that's half the population involved, you know. So he said, and he said, or has he passed, or he's still with us, right? So he got a hit with the fact that he was dead, that he wasn't. Yeah. And he's still with us, but he's ill, isn't he? And the guy sort of, you know, sadly nodded, yes. And he went, is it cancer? And the guy went, yes. And he went, yes. Like this.
Jesus Christ.
Like he just scored a goal.
Yes.
You know, and you think, this is just, it's gone
nasty.
from being funny to being tragic. Really, you know. And that's kind of what I object to is, you know, people impersonating people's dead children for money. I mean, there's no excuse.
I mean, doing your like background checks, doing the preliminary research, I get that. Social cues, body language, we're social animals. We're kind of good, you know, in noticing stuff as you just described in the examples. But what I'm really interested in is the usage of language. You know, that's the real skill, I think, that people are using. Because I kept thinking about astrology, for instance, how they phrase things. They can they tell you things like, so you're a very tidy person, but you tend to be chaotic occasionally. It's like again, we all do.
You tend to bottle things up, and then you let them all out at once.
Right. So they're like sort of like very inclusive statements. Is inclusive the right word? Like very broad statements that everybody can find themselves in.
Ambiguous a lot of the time,
very ambiguous. I know the usage of language. I'm reading this book right now called Cultish, you know, about cults, which is like very, very focused on this particular use of language, and we can see that, you know, it's being broadly used in social media and all of that to manipulate people. Is it the same basic I'm tempted to call them biases or ways of thinking that people have when you trick them with cards and when you trick them with ideology. I mean, do we find something common here?
Yes, I think that probably the thing they've got in common, kind of general magic and psychics, is that people, if they've paid to see a magic show, they're generally not skeptical. They haven't gone to catch the magician out.
Yeah,
they've bought into it, so they want a bit of escapism, a bit of a sort of fantasy moment. And similarly with the psychics, you don't go and see, most people, I do, but most people don't go and see a psychic because they don't believe it to start with.
Yeah.
So they've already got the emotional investment. There's answers they want. They already believe in an afterlife. And with magic, it's slightly different in that people are basically suspending their disbelief for entertainment purposes. So, they don't really think that because you can find their chosen card that you're the master of the physical universe, but it's an entertainment thing. I think actually interesting with kind of mentalism, with mental magic, they do tend to buy into it a bit more. And that's probably because if you watch a magician doing a card trick, you think, oh, it's mainly sleight of hand. It's, it's being good with your hands. Whereas in fact, most of it is still psychological, but the kind of sleight of hand with it. If you're going to see mental magic, then it is purely psychological in the main. You might be using some kind of gimmicked, some tricked props, but people are actually buying into the idea that they're reading your body language. You know, I mean, quite often you'll go and see a mentalist at the theatre, and it's the simplest method, the same method that a magician you would use for a card trick or whatever. But because Derren Brown is particularly good at this, the British mind reader. Where he'll give a false explanation which misdirects the person, because while they're thinking about whether that's feasible and that they're not actually thinking about the real method, so their mind is occupied for that period. So he'll say that, oh, well, your left elbow twitched twice there. And also when you said the word lie, you sounded like you were lying. And so while they're thinking about this, they're not thinking about the fact that he might have used a bit of carbon paper. Or,
right.
It's kind of, so it's using psychology as misdirection, which is an interesting, meta thing. It's got a world within a world.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
Well, I consider myself to be quite a skeptical person, and I'm trying to deconstruct, a certain situation that I don't understand. But mentalists keep really amaze me and shock me.
Sure.
For instance, there was this guy who is doing what was this website called, in which you just click and you get to a random person on a camera, anywhere in the world, one of these. And he gets to a random person and he's like, okay, so your name is like, with the name, and people out there are like, wow, screaming. So how did you, and I don't get that. I have no idea how he does that.
No, I mean, I haven't seen it, so I couldn't really comment much. But I think it's interesting that they've become popular again. I mean, they were very, very popular kind of turn of the century, last century, sort of 1880s through till about 1920s. And interestingly, they were the big names on the kind of variety bills in theatres. And a lot of the time they become big names after major wars because people, they were combining it with the mediumship thing. So pretending to contact dead people, answering. So people have been in a bad situation. They want reassurance from beyond the grave or whatever it is. So that's when they, they're capitalised. I think it's slightly different in recent times. I think it's because of TV and social media. So they've got a different proscenium arch, if you will. So in a theatre, you're using certain techniques because, you've got a stage, so you can have trapdoors, you can use mirrors, you can, you've got frayed people who are only watching you front on. On TV, on something like this, we've got kind of similar framing, but we've also got technology that's behind the scenes that no one can see. So they've adapted the methods, but it's pretty much the same psychology involved. So for this one guy who's apparently sat in his office or his kitchen or wherever he is doing this, who knows? There may be a whole team behind that, with access to. So someone offered me going back about 10 years, I was doing performing at a conference which was the National Security Awards or something in Birmingham in the UK. Yeah, it's quite frightening actually, because the technology level, even at that point, was they'd already got the kind of tracking cameras that, you know, if there's a movement that was something bigger than a cat, it'd come in, find the face, lock on them and record them.
Right.
You know, so there's all this stuff 10, maybe 12 years ago. While I was there looking at all these, they had stands there demonstrating all this stuff. And a guy came up to me who knew who I was magic-wise, and it was something that he'd offered to Derren Brown, and Derren Brown had turned it down for whatever reason. But it was basically software where you could put someone's name into it, and within a couple of seconds it would tell you the colour of their front door, what type of car they drove, all the rest of it. And this is, you know, going back.
Privacy nightmare.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, they wanted silly money for access to it. But you're thinking, well, if that was around 10 or 12 years ago, you know, imagine how sophisticated it is now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you were, you know, going into it for the big money and doing big theatres, it's worth investing.
I bet.
But you don't really need to. I mean, as I say, social media. There was a thing last week where someone was asking for a medium to be recommended. And so I just sort of said, you know, I know you don't want to hear negatives, and I know you'll carry on believing regardless. But she actually said, positive comments only, please.
Yeah.
I said, but just out of interest, your granddad was this age, your granddad had the all the rest of it, and that's what they will tell you, you know.
Right.
Having paid you a lot of money, that's on the house from me, you know. So it's, yeah, and I don't think it's ever going to stop. I mean, that's the other thing. It's, as I said earlier, people want to believe.
Yeah.
And so the cognitive dissonance is incredible, you know. I still get emails kind of on a weekly basis from videos I did 15 years ago that someone's come across telling me how wrong I am.
Yeah.
And that Jesus is proof that I'm wrong, you know. It's...
Yeah, well, that's the price that you pay. I still remember. So when I was 6 years old, it's like a really cliche situation in which, you know, it's Christmas Eve. We're expecting for Santa, and obviously my grandfather, you know, like put the suit on without us noticing, and there's a ring on the door, and I opened the door, and here it is, you know, like Santa. Yeah. But you know, his mustache was not very well stitched.
Sure.
But what happened then is not me realizing that Santa doesn't exist, but me thinking that, oh my God, Grandpa is Santa. You know, so it happened exactly, and I still remember this particular feeling that I had at this very moment.
Sure.
And I haven't had that feeling for the rest of my life still.
No,
you know?
Sure.
It's great. It's amazing.
Well,
you know?
that is the kind of job of a magician, really. I think Doug Henning, who was a famous Canadian magician who's big in the States, I think his phrase was, the function or the job of a magician is to keep alive a sense of wonder.
Yeah.
And so that I've always found it fascinating, the link between Houdini and Arthur Conan Doyle. I was just reading about Conan Doyle yesterday. And Houdini is one of my sort of specialist subjects, really. And it was almost like the two guys were in the wrong bodies, if you will. Because Houdini, I mean, they were both physically very fit, although Conan Doyle in his older age became, you know, a bit chunky. Yeah. But Houdini was, you know, a skeptic, debunked. He actually believed in an afterlife, but just didn't believe that they could be contacted. Yeah. And he believed in God.
And that's a different thing.
Yeah. And but his whole thing was, you know, the mysteriarch, he used to call himself, and it was about this sense of wonder. Conan Doyle, the complete opposite, was a man of science, a doctor, you know, wrote about the most logical fictional character ever, Sherlock Holmes, and yet believed in any old crap. You know,
was it fairy tales?
Fairies, the Cottingley fairies, where a couple of little girls had cut out pictures of fairies from a colouring book and mounted them on trees and plants and stuff, took photographs of themselves, and he wrote a book called The Coming of the Fairies, these beings from another dimension, and this was proof of it, but also an ardent spiritualist, and that's how he and Houdini eventually fell out in about, I think it's 1920, 21. And it's this incredible thing where you go, the scientific guy is the one that believes all the stuff, you know, any old claptrap, whereas Houdini, who's created this kind of sense of wonder, this fantasy world, is the one that's the skeptic. You know? Yeah, it's bizarre.
Interesting. Yeah. There were, this. We here at Ratio, we are doing science communication for a reason. I mean, there was actually this transition from me being 6 years old and believing in magic. Then I became a skeptic. Obviously I read like a bunch of books, a bunch of stuff happened, and at some point, getting into science, I realized that science is even weirder than any magic that I've read.
Yes.
And it's like, it's a quantum entanglement. It's like what you can influence two particles that are billions of miles away, just by tickling with one of them, and the other one is doing something, or they can be at the same spot at the same time. Or then you have like the weird placebo effect that is getting on my nerves, that I don't understand. Yeah. You have like the day on Venus is longer than the year. It's just like very non-intuitive, weird stuff happening. Yeah. But at the same time, it does seem doing science communication. Even these stories don't have the same appeal for some reason.
No, I think because it doesn't touch them directly. It's not about them. And I think, unfortunately, audiences in general, the past few years, have started to make, a lot of theatre now has to be immersive. Right. It can't be about just watching someone in a distance. You look at people who are at concerts and they're constantly doing selfies with the show in the background because it's about them.
Yeah.
And this is the problem, I think, with a lot of science, is talking about other galaxies or particles billions of miles away. So what? I won't be around. There's a TV show called Gogglebox in the UK, which is basically watching people watching TV, which is actually awesome. It's actually a bit more interesting than it sounds.
Yeah.
So you get to know their family characters, and there's some funny people there. But it's interesting whenever there's something that's kind of a nature program or something about science in general, unless it's about an animal getting attacked and it's a baby animal and they get upset about it, they're not really interested. So someone, has discovered something new about black holes, and they go, what's a black hole and who cares? Or the sun's going to explode in X number of years or whatever it is. And they go, well, we won't be around then, will we? So we don't care. And so I think there's that general thing. But I don't know. I think, I said the same as you. I mean, science is far weirder than any form of entertainment, and yet people are more impressed by someone telling them that their granddad drove a black car, than they are by watching a sunset and realizing what causes the colors. And I've often said, I think people tend to assume because you're debunking things that you don't enjoy anything yourself, that you have no sense of wonder. And you go, no, I enjoy a sunset just because I realize that it's largely pollution that's causing those beautiful colors. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy it.
It only adds, it doesn't subtract.
Exactly.
Knowledge only adds. And I still find it weird that people find the story of evolution less interesting and fascinating than the fact that we've been made from a piece of clay or like mud. It's like, is it exactly because it doesn't sound logical and breaks even our like intuitive understanding of how the physical world works that makes these stories more appealing and more sexy? What do you reckon?
I'm not sure, because if you think about the science side of things, you would think if they like weird stuff, they would get into that.
Yeah.
But no, as I say, I think it's largely an ego thing. It's as simple as, I think, without getting too political, I think it's the same as the rise of nationalism, that whole parochial thing, that Einstein quote about nationalism is an infantile disease, it's the measles of mankind. And I think, bizarrely, you look at how much information is out there for everyone now on the internet, just that information overload, which is probably part of the problem. They've got access to every fact in the world, but they will choose the ones, the cognitive dissonance, the ones that appeal to them. And you go, well, there's no out from this, because instead of the world becoming more homogenous, it's going the other way, and people are putting up more borders and getting smaller because it's got to be about them, and creating artificial enemies and things to separate people. I'm not quite sure why that's happening, but what I do know is it's a repeated thing throughout history. Well, if your life is a bit shit, find someone to blame for it rather than yourself. I mean, talking to psychologist friends of mine, they were saying that they lecture at universities, and they were saying saying that now the difference is between students that don't do well is they and their parents blame the system because they're paying for the education now.
Mm-hmm. They're customers.
Yes, exactly. And so they, rather than it being something that they can improve in themselves, they've always got to be right, and it's someone else is failing them, or the system
What
is failing them.
What happened with our culture?
I was going to say God knows, but that's the wrong.
God knows.
It's bizarre. I'm not at all positive the way things are going at the moment.
Right.
But I think it is very much tied in with. It's interesting actually, because I deal a lot with arguing with particular people of a particular political persuasion and with people who believe in psychics and the paranormal in general. They do tend to be on the same side. It's people who believe in chemtrails tend to be right-wingers.
Right.
And I'm not quite sure exactly why that is, but I think it is having that, the chemtrails thing in particular is that paranoia that someone out is out to get you, the government in this case, or the global elite, or the Illuminati, or whoever it is. And similarly with the right wing, it's basically that they're blaming someone else. It's someone abroad. It's the EU in the UK.
Sure,
really?
yeah.
So it's that, I don't know. It tends to be people who are selfish, which I think you can equate with being right-wing. It's that parochial thing. Only I matter, only my family matters. And that's very much linked with belief in the paranormal. Yeah, weirdly.
It's funny. I think like 10 or 12 years ago, when you gave a talk, you talked about Vanga, right? You remember about
Baba Vanga? Yes.
About Baba Vanga? Yeah. It's interesting that anecdotally, I think many people can share this the same experience in which you have a conversation with a person and they say, "Oh, I don't believe in psychics, but Baba Vanga is something else." So in general, you don't believe in psychics, but this particular lady, she's the real deal.
And the phrase is always, because they told me something they couldn't possibly have known.
Right, yeah.
And you go, well, a magician will do that, a mentalist there. If you want to see someone telling you things that they couldn't have known, go and see an entertainer rather than someone pretending to be otherworldly.
So what is the recipe here? Have magicians in school?
Sorry?
Have magicians in school?
Well, I mean,
how do you teach this type of critical, thinking?
I think obviously, critical thinking in school would be a good thing, and particularly in the States, that's not going the right way at the moment. But in fact, I was just reading something earlier today about some Republican senator or whatever was saying yesterday that the climate change is a hoax because God created the sun, and the sun is largely responsible for the weather. Right, so that's the level we're working with.
Yes,
and she's actually on the education committee for the whole country.
Well, terrific.
So I'm sorry, sidetracked again. What was the question again?
Well, I mean, the question was how
magicians in schools. Yeah. So I think it would be a good move, not necessarily just a magician, but if you can frame the critical thinking in something other than an academic sort of module, so you've got entertainment involved. Perhaps a magician going in with someone else, demonstrating a trick, something that they possibly, couldn't possibly have known, and then explaining how it was done. That would disappoint the kids. It may make them a little bit more cynical, but at least it would get the message across, right. Rather than just someone who's another teacher. It was interesting. I did a show a couple of years ago called Monkey Business, which was about the weird stuff that you got advertised in the back of American comics back in the 60s, 70s, 80s. So things like X-ray specs and sea monkeys and all that. And they were basically cons for kids. And the conclusion I came to at the end of this talk, and the guy who invented, are you aware of sea monkeys? What sea monkeys were?
Were these that you give this frog, baby frogs, how do you call those, in a jar and they grow
similar.
up?
It was actually brine shrimp in the end. So
brine shrimp,
So they were dehydrated eggs, and but there was a con involved with that as well, apart from the advertising and the fact that they're supposed to look like monkeys with a crown.
Yeah.
So there's a whole story about this, but the guy who kind of not discovered them, but sort of created the concept. Also invented X-ray specs, although he nicked the idea from somewhere, and he turned out to be a real nasty guy. He was a neo-Nazi dealing in kids' novelties.
Yeah, of course he was.
A member of Aryan Nation and the KKK and all sorts of things.
Oh, wow.
But it makes for a very interesting story. And I sort of came to this conclusion at the end of it, that nowadays, because you don't get that stuff advertised in comics anymore, that's why we're in the crap that we're in, is basically because kids aren't cynical and don't learn their lessons in disappointment early on. Because, you know, if you discover that adults lie to you when you're 10 years old, that's a valuable life lesson.
Right.
You know, and that all that glitters, or all that glisters, I think is the original quote, isn't gold. So, you know, if they're selling X-ray specs for 50 cents or whatever it is, then, you know, they're probably ripping you off with that X-ray machine at the hospital that supposedly cost millions.
Right.
So it's, you know, or vice versa. So, you know, in a weird comedic way, I think that kids being disappointed early on is a valuable life lesson.
Right. Yeah. You know, there is a discussion, public discussion, very big right now in Bulgaria, because what they want to do is have religious education in schools. And there is a discussion whether, you know, how do we approach that? Do we study all the religions, you know, from a culturological and anthropological point of view? Or do we involve the church, in which they actually, you know, speak about the gospel and all of that? So it's a very heated discussion. And now me as you know, I'm an atheist, but I have a very like a cozy relationship with church. I sort of envy their sense of community, you know, and all of that. I see the good
I
sides.
think many atheists do. I mean, and again, that idea of being godless doesn't mean that you haven't got a sense of wonder. It doesn't mean that you've got no moral compass, you know.
But you know, me being young, I was like very preachy about being atheist, you know, like the kitchens and all this stuff, darkness, and it's normal.
We've all been there.
Yeah, but getting old, you know, this slightly changes. But I keep thinking around this discussion that, you know, many of the people in my bubble, for instance, are very much against that. And it's exactly what you said. You know, I'm thinking it's probably the fastest way to make them an atheist is having a freaking priest teach them that in school. Because I can see we don't have religious classes right now in Bulgaria, and still the view that God created man is pretty dominant among children that are the age of my son. He's like literally the sole person who is saying, hey, you know, there is an alternative history here that you can. But no, I mean,
no, I think it should be compulsory before you can call yourself a Christian to actually have read the Bible and answer questions on it. There should be a test. Because I'm pretty damn sure that everybody out here ranting about Christianity, mainly in an anti-Islam manner, they've only become Christian because they don't like people from another country. It's just a great excuse for racism. And so I think, there should be a proficiency test to call yourself a Christian.
No, definitely, I mean, we're becoming a more and more secular society. We used to become a more secular society. Probably we're moving back these days. Yes, unfortunately, I would add. But I do understand this certain gap, you know, that appears. Like me becoming atheist, I was like very arrogant. It's like, okay, I'll do this and that. But I understand the need, you know, to have something there, and even to believe in something magical. And the way that I approach this with my kids is that I'm trying to convince them. It's like, okay, it's like, do monsters exist? And I'm like, yeah, they're just not here. You know, they inhabit a different world. You know, a world that you can enter through like movies, books. You know, they live in the books. They live in the stories that we tell, and they're freaking real. You know, they can scare you.
No, I feel the same about about ghosts. You know, I think I started recently on a sort of, I think it's called Paranormal Monkey podcast. But basically, they're saying, "Do you believe in ghosts, or what's your take on it?" And very loosely speaking, I think that people do have experience of ghosts, but it is all internal. You know, they might see a ghost. It doesn't mean the ghost's physically there. You know, so I'm not knocking their experience. But I don't think, you know, in the conventional sense, hence explaining, you know, the old cliche that since mobile phones were invented and everybody's got a camera, there aren't any more pictures of ghosts than there were before, other than the ones generated by apps, you know.
Yes, that's right.
So in fact, there were more pictures of ghosts in the Victorian era when it was a real ball ache to set up a camera than there are nowadays. days. But so yeah, it's like I say, people can have a religious experience. People can see monsters or ghosts. Yeah. But that doesn't mean they exist in the physical plane.
Right, right. And you know, we've been struggling with what is the type of conversation that we want to have through our organization. And we initially started, you know, with the approach, okay, we're going to preach science now, you know, we're going to, and then we got like pretty disgusted because there were like separate skeptic organizations here in Bulgaria that were very nasty. You know, it's like their approach was, you guys are idiots, you know, there is this and that and this and that. And at some point we realized that, was it Daniel Dennett who said that a meaningful philosophical discussion requires that you understand the position of the other to such an extent that you could explain it back to him or her? Yeah. And the reaction should be, okay, I didn't know that I can phrase it this way. You're that level of deep understanding, and then you make an argument. And when trying to do that, when trying to understand the position of the other, you see where they're coming from, and you calm down. You calm the hell down. Yeah.
Well, I think that, you know, a major problem, I think, is that in every walk of life these days, and it's probably directly as a result of the digital age, is that everything is binary. There are no grey areas anymore. You're either for or against. Yeah. And like I was saying before, you know, if you're into chemtrails, you're probably also an anti-vaxxer, also right-wing, also, you know, so there's no area where people go, well, actually, I believe that, but I don't believe that. Yes. Well, you're not with us then. You know, so it's become tribal, you know, the whole binary side of things. So you're either, it's like people believing in UFOs, probably also believe in ghosts. Right. They probably also go tarot readings. They probably, you know, so there's no selectivity anymore. It's just, it's all or nothing.
And we are very impatient. It's like there is this politician here in Bulgaria who's I know his heart is at the right place. He's a liberal, as I am, but the fact that he wears a certain like jewelry, you know, the moment I saw that, and I was like, okay, fuck that guy. Yeah. And then I caught myself, and I was like, what are you doing? Sure. It's like, why? Yeah. You know, it's like he doesn't listen to that type of music. Come on. Yeah. It's like that's not.
I caught myself the other day. There was a young magician guy that I vaguely know who's from Blackpool, who won the big national talent show, Britain's Got Talent thing, and I you know, he's a very good performer. He won the thing. Everybody's very happy for it. And I kept thinking, why am I just getting the bad vibes, to use a pseudo-spiritual term? And I realised it's because he looks a bit like a young Tommy Robinson.
Oh, my God.
And so you think, oh, yeah, what a ridiculous reason to kind of get a negative... I know, right? So I think the term they would use would be negative energy, which is one of my pet hates, that thing. Yes, you need charge, not energy.
It's funny, very often when we have elections in Bulgaria, you can volunteer. Well, you're getting paid, but it's still a pretty voluntary thing to become part of an election commission, like in a local election office where people come and vote. Right. And as per the rules here in Bulgaria, there should be a representative of each different party. So you have like 6 people in a room who are observing, you know, how the voting is going. And the last time I did it, we were like caricatures of the political parties that we represented. It's like literally, I'm like the liberal hipster. The nationalist guy was like all in leather and the tattoos. You know, the socialist guy who was like an ex-military communist dude, that very recognizable characters, caricatures. And I entered this room, and we were all like, "Oh my God, we got to take a photo of each other." You know, it was ridiculous. And but during the course of the day, just by having a conversation with these people, you realize that you share much more in common than anything. Yeah. If you skip politics aside, oh my God, it was nice.
Absolutely. You know, well, you've only got to look at, you know, we have the sort of, I forget what it's called, but the parliamentary TV in the UK, where you can watch a very boring single shot of the piece, and people are asleep, and you know,
it's very often funny though. You know,
yeah. But you see, you know, these people who've been in the headlines at each other's throats and hating, just calling each other all sorts of, you know, nasty names, and then they're just having a casual chat in there, you know, they're kind of shaking hands.
These assholes. I mean, why are they doing that? The moment the cameras come on, and they become different people. I don't know how we're going to deal with all these problems, Paul.
No, I think, I think once I know I've got some, you know, terminal disease, I'll become an assassin.
Probably something like that. Well, you will be on the stage, or you've been when this airs. You have already have been
Right, yeah.
On the stage with.
I was very good.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Yes, with oh my God, the name escaped me. Come on,
Richard Wiseman.
Richard Wiseman.
Yeah.
Yes, I've read
Professor Richard Wiseman. Yes, who's he's a good friend of mine.
Also a very funny guy. Yeah.
Yes, it was weird actually because in Edinburgh Fringe Festival, it's the huge international arts festival, and it's very difficult to find accommodation, and I quite often stay at his house, and it's quite bizarre because last time I stayed there, because we both collect antique magic posters and things like that, he had the same posters in the bedroom that I've got at home, and it was just this surreal thing, kind of waking up thinking, "Oh, I'm like, no, I'm not."
You are the same. I'm sure the show will be great by the time of recording, and
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah,
it's going to be amazing, and I do hope we're gonna have an opportunity to talk again, Paul.
Yeah, hope so.
That was great.
Not in 10 years.
Not in 10 years, hopefully.
Then.
Yeah. That was great. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Take care.